Have you ever been driving a car when one of the warning lights on the dashboard suddenly comes on? Maybe the gas gauge starts blinking because you're getting low on fuel. It's handy when you have that alert right in front of you, clearly showing you that you need to pay attention to your gas level. Can you imagine if cars didn't have dashboards? We'd never know if we were about to run out of gas. We'd have no idea if our tire pressure was low or if it was time for an oil change. Without dashboards, if our cars started acting differently, we'd have to pull out the user manual, sift through all that information inside, and try to figure out the problem ourselves. Car dashboards make it easy for drivers to understand and respond to any issues with their vehicles because they're constantly tracking and analyzing the car's status. But, as you've been learning, dashboards aren't just for cars. Companies also use them to share information, get people engaged with business plans and goals, and uncover potential problems. And just like a car's dashboard, data analytics dashboards take tons of information and bring it to life in a clear, visually interesting way. This is extremely important when telling a story with data, which is why it's a big part of number 2 in our 3 data storytelling steps. You've learned that a dashboard is a tool that organizes information from multiple data sets into one central location for tracking, analysis, and simple visualization through tables, charts, and graphs. Dashboards do this by constantly monitoring live, incoming data. As we've been discussing, you can make dashboards that are specifically designed to speak to your stakeholders. You can think about who will be looking at the data and what they need from it, and how often they'll use it. Then you can make a dashboard with the perfect information just for them. This is helpful because people can get confused and distracted when they're presented with too much data. A dashboard keeps things neat and tidy and easy to understand. When designing a dashboard, it's best to start simple with just the most important data points. And if later on you discover something's missing, you can always go back and tweak your dashboard or create a new one. An important part of dashboard design is the placement or layout of your charts, graphs, and other visuals. These elements need to be cohesive, which means they're balanced and make good use of the space on the dashboard. After you decide what information should be on your dashboard, you might need to resize and reorganize it so it works better for your users. One option in Tableau is choosing between a vertical or horizontal layout. A vertical layout adjusts the height. A horizontal layout resizes the width of the views and objects it contains. Also, as you can see here, evenly distributing the items within your layout helps create a clear and organized data visual. You can select either tiled or floating layouts. Tiled items are part of a single layer grid that automatically resizes based on the overall dashboard size. Floating items can be layered over other objects. In this example, the map and scatter plots are tiled. They don't overlap. This really helps make clear what the data is all about, which is valuable because the majority of people in the world are visual learners. They process information based on what they see. That's why sharing your dashboards with stakeholders is such a valuable practice. Now, there's something important to keep in mind about that. Sharing dashboards with others likely means that you'll lose control of the narrative. In other words, you won't be there to tell the story of your data and share your key messages. Dashboards put storytelling power in the hands of the viewer. That means they'll craft their own narrative and draw their own conclusions. But don't let that scare you away from being collaborative and open. Just understand the risks that come with sharing your dashboards. After all, sharing information and resources means that you'll have more people working on the solution to a big problem or coming up with that next big idea. This leads to more connections, which can result in really exciting new practices and innovations. So far, we've focused a lot on understanding our audience. Whether you're trying to engage people with data storytelling or creating dashboards designed for a certain person or group, understanding your audience is key. As you've learned, you can make dashboards that are tailored to meet different stakeholder requirements. To do this, it's important to think about who will be looking at the data and what they need from it. In this video, we'll continue exploring how to create compelling visuals to tell an interesting and persuasive data story. One great tool for doing this is a filter. You've learned about filters in spreadsheets and queries, but as a refresher, filtering means showing only the data that meets a specific criteria while hiding the rest. Filtering works the same way with dashboards. You can apply different filters for different users based on their needs. Tableau lets you limit the data you see based on the criteria you specify. Maybe you want to filter data in a data set to show only the last 6 months. Or maybe you want to see information from one particular customer. You can even limit the number of rows or columns in a view. To explore these options, let's return to our world happiness example. Say your stakeholders were interested in only a few of the topics that affect overall happiness. Filtering for just gross domestic product, family, generosity, freedom, trust, and health, and then creating individual scatter plots for each would make this possible. You can also use filters to highlight or hide individual data points. For instance, if you have a scatter plot with outliers, you may want to explore what your plot would look like without them. However, note that this is just an example to show you how filters work. It's not okay to drop a data point just because it's an outlier. Outliers can be important observations, sometimes even the most interesting ones. So be sure to put on your data detective hat and investigate that outlier before deciding to remove it from your dashboard. Here's how to do it. To filter data points from the view, we can choose a single data point or click and drag in the view to select several points. Let's choose just one. Then, on the tooltip that appears, we'll select Exclude to hide it. Or we could have chosen to do it the other way by keeping only selected data points. Here's another example. If your data is in a table, you can filter entire rows or columns from your view. To do this, we'll select the rows we want in the view. Then, on the tooltip that appears, we'll choose to keep only those countries. Again, we could have also selected the data points we wanted to exclude and picked that option instead. Or if you like, we can even pre-filter a Tableau dashboard. This means that your stakeholders don't have to filter the data themselves. Basically, by doing the filtering for them, you can save them time and effort and direct them to the important data you want them to focus on. Personally, I think the best thing about filters is they let you zero in on what's important. Sometimes I'm working with a huge data set and I want to concentrate only on a specific area, so I'll add a filter to limit the data displayed on my dashboard. This cuts the clutter and gives me a simple, clear visual. I use filters a lot when working with data about advertising campaign performance. Filters help me isolate specific tactics, such as search or YouTube ads, to see which ones are working best and which ones could be improved. By limiting and customizing the information I'm looking at, it's much easier for me to see the story behind the numbers. And as I'm sure you've noticed, I love a good data story. As a data analyst, you'll often be relying on spreadsheets to create quick visualizations of your data to tell your story. Let's practice building a chart in a spreadsheet. To follow along, use the spreadsheet link in the previous reading, also included in the video. We'll be using Google Sheets, so this might look a little different in other spreadsheet platforms like Excel. We'll begin by filtering just the data on how many customers purchased Basic, Plus, or Premium software packages. To start, select the column for the software package and insert a chart. The spreadsheet suggests what it thinks is the best type of chart for our data. But we can choose any type of chart you'd like. Spreadsheet charts also let you assign different styles, axis titles, a legend, and many other options. Feel free to explore the different functionality later on. We'll also cover this more in a reading. There's lots of different options to choose from. Let's say we also have data on which countries our customers are from and their overall satisfaction score for the software they purchased. First, highlight columns A and B. Then, click on Insert and then Chart again. Under Chart Type, you'll want to select the first Map option. Voila! Now we have a map that summarizes the customer survey scores by country. We can also customize this chart by clicking Customize in the top right corner. Let's say we wanted to change our colors from red and green to a gradient so it's more accessible. We can do that by clicking Geo and then change the min color to the lightest shade of blue, the mid color to the middle shade of blue, and the max color to the darkest shade of blue to show the spectrum of scores from low to high. Now we have a map chart that shows where respondents are most satisfied with their software in dark blue and least satisfied with their software in light blue. And this will be easier for anyone in our audience with color vision deficiencies to understand. Tableau and spreadsheets are common tools for creating data visualizations. By using their built-in functionalities, like filters and charts, you can zero in on what information is most important and create compelling visuals for your audience. And now that we've explored some ways to create visuals, it's time to start preparing our data narrative. Coming up, we're going to talk more about telling stories with data and organizing presentations. I'll see you soon. Businesses everywhere know the power of using data to solve problems and achieve goals. But all the data in the world won't get you anywhere if your stakeholders can't understand it, or if they can't stay focused on what you're telling them. So you want to create presentations that are logically organized, interesting, and communicate your key messages clearly. An effective presentation supports your narrative by making it more interesting than words alone. It starts with how you want to organize your data insights. The narrative you share with your stakeholders needs characters, a setting, a plot, a big reveal, and an aha moment, just like any other story. The characters are the people affected by your story. This could be your stakeholders, customers, clients, and others. When adding information about your characters to your story, you have a great opportunity to include a personal account and bring more human context to the facts that the data has revealed. Think about why they care. Next up is the setting, which describes what's going on, how often it's happening, what tasks are involved, and other background information about the data project that describes the current situation. The plot, sometimes called the conflict, is what creates tension in the current situation. This could be a challenge from a competitor, an inefficient process that needs to be fixed, or a new opportunity that the company just can't pass up. This complication of the current situation should reveal the problem your analysis is solving and compel the characters to act. The big reveal, or resolution, is how the data has shown that you can solve the problem the characters are facing by becoming more competitive, improving a process, inventing a new system, or whatever the ultimate goal of your data project may be. Finally, your aha moment is when you share your recommendations and explain why you think they'll help your company be successful. When I'm working on a presentation, this is where I like to start too. Using these basic elements to outline your presentation can be a great place to start, and they can help you organize your findings into a clear story. And once you've decided on these 5 key parts of your story, it's time to think about how to pair your narrative with interesting visuals. Because, as you're learning, an interesting and persuasive data story needs interesting and persuasive visuals. Coming up, you'll learn even more about how to be an expert data storyteller. Welcome back. Now that you know how to prepare the key parts of your data story, the character, setting, plot, big reveal, and the aha moment, it's time to think about the visuals and how your slideshow should look. It's always good to remember that your presentation reflects on you. If it's messy, disorganized, or full of images that don't support your story, your audience could easily lose confidence in your results and recommendations. On the other hand, if your slideshow looks professional and appealing, you've got a better chance to capture your audience's attention and keep them focused on your main points. Themes are a great tool for this. They control the color, font types and sizes, formatting, and positioning of text and visuals. Some themes are fun or creative, while others have a more professional look. By choosing a theme that matches the tone and information you're communicating, your presentation will have a consistent look and support the argument you are trying to make. Next comes the title. It's good to include a title and subtitle that describe what you're about to present. You should include the date of your presentation too, especially if you're including data that's likely to change over time. Specifying a date, such as a date created or date last updated, gives anyone viewing your presentation important context. A good slideshow guides the audience through your main communication points, but it doesn't repeat every word you say or give a lot of written information. Part of your job is to choose what information to include. This might be a description of what's being shown in a visual, the first step in a process, a set of directions, or an important message that you want to be sure your audience understands and remembers. Also, be sure to adjust the font size so your audience can easily read what you've written. A good rule is to keep text to less than 5 lines and 25 words per slide. Basically, you want your audience focused on what you're saying, not busy reading the slides. Also, choose your words carefully. It's always smart to avoid slang terms, abbreviations that people might not know, and words or phrases that are specific to one particular region. Now let's discuss visuals. Visuals help the audience quickly understand the content of each slide. They can help you make a point in a way that words might not be able to alone. Great visuals don't leave room for interpretation because the meaning is instantly understood. When you include visuals on a slide, try not to share too many details all at once. Choose just the data points that support your points, especially your key message. I like to ask myself, what's the single most important thing I want my audience to learn from my analysis? That helps me decide which visuals will be most likely to get the point across. If you have several important things you need to include, don't cram them all on one slide. Instead, create a new visual for each point. Then, add an arrow, a call-out, or another clearly labeled element to direct your audience's attention toward what you want them to look at. And finally, when you get to your big reveal and aha moment, your visuals must communicate these messages with clarity and excitement. These are the most powerful discoveries from your analysis. Make it feel that way. Before you go, there's one last thing I'd like to share. It's a quick tip for knowing when to copy and paste, link, or embed a visual into a slideshow. This can be challenging for new data analysts, but there are some simple points to keep in mind. When you copy and paste a visual into your presentation, you can edit it directly within your slideshow. If your visual or its data points exist in other places, such as a Tableau dashboard, any changes you make will not affect them there. Now, this also means your visuals won't be updated if the original dataset changes. This means your visual might not be reflecting the latest information. But if you link your visual within your presentation, the visual lives within its original file, and the slideshow connects to it with the visual's URL. Because the two files are now linked, when you make changes to the original file, say a spreadsheet, the changes will automatically appear in your presentation. This can be useful if the data is likely to change over time. Your slideshow will always be up to date. Finally, an embedded object also lives in the original source file, but the difference is that it doesn't get automatically updated if the source file changes. The embedded copy is completely independent. Similarly, you can make changes to it in your presentation without affecting the visual or data points from the original source file. So the main difference between pasted, linked, and embedded objects has to do with where you store them and how you update them after you place them in your slideshow. Now that you're beginning to understand how to make great slideshows, take a few minutes to practice what you've learned. Create a new slideshow and select an appropriate theme. Add your text, visuals, and an exciting reveal at the end. Try pasting, linking, and embedding visuals from different sources to see how they behave differently. You can design a presentation about any data set that interests you. It doesn't need to be long or have a ton of information. Just take the first steps and have fun telling your own data story.
Hi, my name is Sandhas and I am an analytical lead at Google. My role is turning data into powerful stories that influences business decisions. I have an untraditional background where I have a 6-year gap between my high school and my college career. So for me, when I was trying to start all over again, So I started at a community college. That was my first exposure to online learning. And it was perfect because I was managing kids at home. So at Google, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and I personally relate to it quite a bit. Being the first female in my family to graduate university and also being an immigrant, a lot of the times I'm surrounded by people who do not look like me. For example, there was one time where I was presenting to senior leaders in my org, and I was so nervous presenting to them. I was like, "This, I'm gonna totally blow this up, and they're going to figure out that I'm just totally a fraud and fake." One of the things that I changed is that even though I was the only female in my team, I started networking. I started expanding my network, and I met a lot of women who are from the country where I am from, and they were also immigrant. They also struggled with English, and they also looked like me, and they were doing very well in their career. They were being successful. So when I looked at them, I was like, okay, if they can do it, then so can I. So that was for me was a big confidence boost to kind of get over that imposter syndrome feeling. But I struggle from it day to day. I'm struggling with it right now, standing in front of you. Do I even deserve to be talking about my journey and my skills? So it's completely normal. There are a few things that I like to do. One is that I like to give myself a pep talk. Pep talk definitely works. Just saying you're totally worth it. You deserve it. It does wonders for me personally. The second thing I like to do is I like to keep a log of my success and failures. So when I am at a down point, when I'm feeling down or feeling like I do not belong here, I look at all the things that I have achieved from that log, and that kind of helps me. That's a good reminder of the hard work that I've put in to kind of get here. So I did not get here because of luck. I got here because I worked hard and I earned it. My family is actually really, really proud of me. After seeing me go to school and graduate with two kids, my younger brother, he actually went to school with two kids as well, and he graduated, he finished his master's program. And my sister-in-law, who also had two kids, and she was managing, and after seeing me that I could do it, they had somebody to look up to. And so my sister-in-law went back to school, and she finished her degree as well. So I think just being the first in my family was really hard because I didn't have anybody to look up to. But now I am that person that people in my family can look up to, specifically girls, and they can pursue whatever they put their minds to.
Welcome back. Now that we're in the share phase of the data analysis process, it's time to show other people what we've found. You've already learned about creating data visualizations and how to use data-driven storytelling. Now it's time to talk about actually presenting the data. Maybe the idea of presenting your findings to stakeholders makes you nervous, or maybe you're getting excited just thinking about it. Either way, these upcoming videos will get you ready to present like a pro. Coming up, we'll learn about the art and science of presentations, some best practices you can use for future presentations, and how to bring multiple data sources together to tell the whole story. As a data analyst, it's important to find answers and make new discoveries during your data analysis. But it's just as important to share those findings with other people. So if you're ready, let's get started. Hi again. Earlier in this program, you learned how to keep your audience in mind when communicating your data findings. By making sure that you're thinking about who your audience is and what they need to know, you'll be able to tell your story more effectively. In this video, we'll learn how to use a strategic framework to help your audience understand the most important takeaways from your presentation. To make your data findings accessible to your audience, you'll need a framework to guide your presentation. This helps to create logical connections that tie back to the business tasks and metrics. As a quick reminder, the business task is the question or problem your data analysis answers. The framework you choose gives your audience context to better understand your data. On top of that, it helps keep you focused on the most important information during your presentation. The framework for your presentation starts with your understanding of the business task. Raw data doesn't mean much to most people, but if you present your data in the context of the business task, your audience will have a much easier time connecting with it. This makes your presentation more informative and helps you empower your audience and knowledge. That's why understanding the business task early on is key. Here's an example. Let's say we're working with a grocery store chain. They've asked us to identify trends in online searches for avocados to help them make seasonal stocking decisions. During our presentation, we want to make sure that we continue focusing on this task and framing our information with it. Let's check out this example slide presentation. We can begin our presentation by framing it with the business task. Here, in this second slide, I've added goals for the discussion. It starts with share an overview of historical online avocado searches. Under that, a more detailed explanation. We'll cover how avocado searches have grown year over year and what that means for your business. Then, we'll examine seasonal trends in online avocado searches using historical data. This is important because understanding seasonal trends can help forecast stocking needs and inform planning. And finally, discuss any potential areas for further exploration. This is where we'll address next steps in the presentation. This clearly outlines the presentation so our audience knows what to expect. It also lets them know how the information we share is going to be connected to the business task. You might remember we talked about telling a story with data before. You can think of this like outlining the narrative. We can do the same thing with our data viz examples. If we're showing this visual graph of annual searches for avocados, we might want to frame it by saying, this graph shows the months with the most online searches for avocados last year. So we can expect that this interest in avocados will fall on the same months this year. That can even be used in our speaker notes for this slide. This is a great place to add important points you want to remember during the presentation ahead of time. These notes aren't visible to your audience in presentation mode, so they're great reminders you can refer to as you present. Plus, you can even share your presentation with speaker notes ahead of time to make the content more accessible for your audience. Using this data, the grocery store can anticipate demand and make a plan to stock enough avocados to match their customers' interests. That's just one way we can use the business task to frame our data and make it easier to understand. You also want to make sure you're outlining and connecting with your business metrics. By showcasing what business metrics you use, you can help your audience understand the impact your findings will have. Think about the metrics we use for our avocado presentation. We track the number of online searches for avocados from different months over several years to anticipate trends in demand. By explaining this in our presentation, it's easy for our audience to understand how we used our data. These data points alone, the dates or number of searches, aren't useful for our audience. But when we explain how they are combined as metrics, the data we're sharing makes so much more sense. Here's another potential data viz that we want to use. We can frame it for our audience by including some of our metrics. There's an explanation of what time period this data covers. Our data shows Google search queries from 2004 to 2018. Where we gathered this data from, search queries are limited to the United States only, and a quick explanation of how the trends are being measured. Google Trend scores are normalized at 100. So now that our audience understands the metrics we use to organize this data, they'll be able to understand the graph more clearly. Using a strategic framework to guide your presentation can help your audience understand your findings, which is what the sharing phase of the data analysis process is all about. Coming up, we'll learn even more about how to weave data into your presentations. Hey, great to have you back. So we know how to use our business tasks and metrics to frame our data findings during a presentation. Now let's talk about how you'll work data into your presentations to help your audience better understand and interpret your findings. First, it's helpful for your audience to understand what data was available during data collection. You can also tell them if any new relevant data has come up or if you discovered that you need different data. For our analysis, we used data about online searches for avocados over several years. The data we collected includes all searches with the word avocado, so it includes a lot of different kinds of searches. This helps our audience understand what data they're actually looking at and what questions they can expect it to answer. With the data we collected on searches containing the word avocado, we can answer questions about the general interest in avocados. But if we wanted to know more about something specific, like guacamole, we'd probably need to collect different data to better understand that part of our search data. Next, you'll want to establish the initial hypothesis. Your initial hypothesis is the theory you're trying to prove or disprove with data. In this example, our business task was to compile average monthly prices. Our hypothesis is that this will show clear trends that can help the grocery store chain plan for avocado demand in the coming year. You want to establish your hypothesis early in the presentation. That way, when you present your data, your audience has the right context to put it in. Next, you'll want to explain the solution to your business task using examples and visualizations. A good example is the graph we used last time that clearly visualized the search trend score for the word avocado from year to year. Raw data can take time to sink in, but a good example or visualization can make it much easier for your audience to understand you during a presentation. Keep in mind, presenting your visualizations effectively is just as important as the content, if not more. And that's where the McCandless method we learned about earlier can help. So let's talk through the steps of this method and then apply them to our own data visualizations. The McCandless method moves from the general to the specific, like it's building a pyramid. You start with the most basic information, introduce the graphic you're presenting by name. This directs your audience's attention. Let's open the slide deck we were working on earlier. We've got the framework we explored last time in our two data viz examples. According to the McCandless method, we want to introduce our graphic by name. The name of this graph, Yearly Avocado Search Trends, is clearly written here. When we present it, we'll be sure to share that title with our audience so they know where to focus and what the graphic is all about. Next, you'll want to answer the obvious questions your audience might have before they're asked. Start with the high-level information and work your way into the lowest level of detail that's useful to your audience. This way, your audience won't get distracted trying to understand something that could have easily been answered when the graphic was introduced. We added in the information about when, where, and how this data was gathered to frame this data viz. But it also answers the first question many stakeholders will ask. Where's this data from, and what does it cover? So going back to the second graph in our presentation, let's think about some obvious questions our audience might have when they see this graph at first. This data viz is really interesting, but can be hard to understand at a glance. So our audience might have questions about how to read it. Knowing that, we can add an explanation to our speaker notes to answer these questions as soon as this graph's introduced. This shows time running in a circle with winter months on top and summer on bottom. The farther elements are away from the center, the more queries happen around that time for avocado. Now some of the answers to these questions are built into our presentation. Once you've answered any potential questions your audience might have, you'll want to state the insight your data viz provides. It's important to get everyone on the same page before you move into the supporting details. We can write in some key takeaways to this slide to help our audience understand the most important insights from the graphic. Here, we let the audience know that this data shows us a consistent seasonal trends year over year. We can also see that there's low online interest in avocados from October through December. This is an important insight that we definitely want to share. Even though avocados are a seasonal summer fruit, searches peak in January and February. For a lot of people in the United States, watching the Super Bowl and eating chips with guacamole is popular this time of year. Now, our audience knows what takeaways we want them to have before moving on. The fourth step in the McCandless method is calling out data to support that insight. This is your chance to really wow your audience, so give as many examples as you can. With our avocado graphs, it might be worth pointing to specific examples. In our monthly trends graph, we can point to specific weeks recorded here. During the week of November 25th, 2018, the search score was around 49, but the week of February 4th, the search score was 90. This shows the rise and fall of online search interest with the help of some of the very cool data in our graphs. Finally, it's time to tell your audience why it matters. This is the so what moment. Why is this insight interesting or important to them? This is a good time to present the possible business impact of the solution and clear action stakeholders can take. You might remember that we outlined this in our framework at the beginning of our presentation. So let's explain what this data helps our grocery store stakeholder do. First, they can account for lower interest in avocados between the months of October and December. They can also prepare for the Super Bowl surge in avocado interest in late January, early February. And they'll be able to consider how to optimize stocking practices during summer and spring. There's a little more detail under each of these points, but this is a basic breakdown of the impact. And that's how we use the McCandless method to introduce data visualizations during our presentations. I have one more piece of advice. Take a second to self-check and ask yourself, does this data point or chart support the point I want people to walk away with? It's a good reminder to think about your audience every time you add data to a presentation. So now you know how to present data using a framework and weave data into your presentation for your audience. And you got to learn the McCandless method for data presentation. Coming up, we'll learn some best practices for actually creating presentations. See you soon.
My name is Brittany, and I'm an analytical lead at Google. One of the tips that I have is to try to keep things kindergarten simple. And what that means is keep the concepts that you're presenting as simple and as straightforward as possible. Whenever you enter a room, there are going to be people within that room of varying interest levels, varying knowledge levels. They have different levels of subject matter expertise. Nobody wants to present to a room whose eyes are glazing over. My pet peeve about seeing certain presentations with data is that they often will include what I like to call eyesore charts. And what an eyesore chart is, it has way too much data, it has way too many colors, it just looks busy, and you just really can't figure out what the presenter is actually trying to say. Another tip that I have is to make your presentation fun. So nobody wants to be in a room where you are talking for a full hour and the only voice that you're hearing is your own. One of the things that I try to do to break it up is I try to think of little fun games or quizzes, or I'll play a video or ask questions to the audience just to make sure that they're fully engaged and that they are talking back to me. Another tip that I try to incorporate into my presentations is storytelling. Everybody loves a good story. And when you do it right, you are able to connect and make your audience engage in a way that they probably wouldn't if you weren't telling that story. The last tip that I have is make sure that you have an ally in the room. Oftentimes, before I'm giving a really big data presentation, I will find one or two people that I know are going to be in the room and present my content to them ahead of time. And what that does is it allows me to not only get feedback, but it also allows me to make sure that someone else is nodding their head and aligned to the numbers that I'm about to present. And I can't even tell you how many times that I've been in presentations where those allies have really come to my rescue when the room asks a lot of questions or are potentially trying to poke holes in the analysis. Those allies are there to speak up, and they really are going to have your back and lend credibility to what it is that you're presenting. The most challenging part of my job would be the fact that I am there to convince people to do something that they might not be fully confident that they should be doing. And a lot of times it takes multiple conversations, multiple rounds of convincing for someone to actually come around to what I was trying to articulate or get them to do. When you have spent maybe 6 months or a year building an analysis and building a story and building a narrative for someone to apply to their strategies, and they actually come around and they actually do it, that makes the challenges worth it.
So we're going to dive into specific examples that we have. So we've built what we call a messy example of a data presentation, and we'll walk through each slide and the presentation as a whole to understand why it doesn't actually work well for explaining a specific analysis. We have a title slide, the relationship between health and happiness around the world. Now, right off the bat, there is a very generic picture about the world. It is a very lengthy title, and we know what we're going to be talking about, but there's nothing here that's really compelling about the presentation. So the first slide, when we are looking at a data presentation, we have immediately put a lot of data in front of them and a lot of text in front of them. So right now, they don't know what they're looking at. There was no statement of purpose. We don't have an introduction slide. They don't know who I am. They don't know why they're there. So what are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? What should they walk away with? There's none of that, and we've just immediately gone into the specific data visuals that we are showing them. Now, an important aspect of every slide is also to have a title. Now, title, subtitle, these things help people understand exactly what this slide is going to be discussing so that they know what they're trying to understand as you are talking. So immediately getting here, the audience is going to be lost. They're going to be trying to read the slide. They're going to be trying to decipher what the visuals mean. It's important for you to make sure there's not too much going on. Now, if we move on to the next slide, what we're looking at here is the visuals better. It's easier to understand. There's not more than one of them. We have a map. We have visual colors to represent the numeric values within them. But again, there's nothing for them to really understand. Now, this is where you can explain within the speaker notes, but you also have, again, a lot of words, no title. What is it that they are really trying to get from this slide? Part of a good presentation as well is the theme that you have, or a consistent theme. So you've now switched sides of the specific visual. You have the text on the other side. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but what you're really trying to do throughout a presentation is build some familiarity, especially with data analytics. You're building familiarity with the visuals that you're showing them, the data. By the end of the presentation, they should understand the data or the concept as much as you do. And finally, we have the conclusion slide. This one does have a title, has laughter is the best medicine. We understand, again, what it is that we're looking at, but there was no logical flow on how to get here. Was this overall presentation compelling? We put 2 slides on there. We had too much text. We didn't really explain anything about it. And again, there's awkward placement on where all of these things are within the slide itself. When you're thinking about building a presentation, you should think about it from the audience's point of view. The only thought that's going through their head is, where should my focus be? As I'm trying to listen, as I'm trying to comprehend, where should I be looking? If you have slides like we just showed you, they don't know where they should be looking, or they're going to spend their time reading and trying to comprehend while you're also talking. So it's very important that you are directing their gaze and directing the audience so that they know exactly what they should be listening to, what they should be trying to understand, and you are guiding them through to the overall conclusion. So to sum up in terms of what is wrong with this overall presentation, and not just what you're going to be talking about or what you are trying to conclude, but just the overall placement of the data visuals and the visuals that you chose. So the main thing is there was no story, no logical flow. You started with a bunch of scatter plots and a lot of text, and you moved on to the heat map of the happiness scores. But without somebody presenting something, without any idea of or concept behind what they are trying to conclude. You didn't have titles. There was too much text. It was very difficult to understand, and it was uneven and inconsistent. So even if you had a really good explanation on each slide, you might have lost the audience, because what they were trying to do, what they were trying to understand, is what was the slide trying to tell them. And finally, the most important part of any data analytics presentation is the recommendation or conclusion slide. You had that, but there was no title. They didn't know that this was the end of the presentation, that this is where they should be trying to put all the pieces together. Coming up, we're going to discuss how we can improve this presentation, as well as dive into what the presentation will actually look like when we're trying to explain how health and happiness are correlated.
Thank you for watching our video. We hope you found it helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. If you know someone who could benefit from this information, please share it with them. We would love to hear your thoughts on this learning course, so please leave a comment below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.